Marcus Wellington had built his empire from nothing. At 42 years old, he stood at the top of the technology world, his company worth billions, his name recognized in boardrooms across 5 continents. He had everything money could buy: penthouses in 3 countries, a collection of luxury cars, and influence that opened any door. But tonight, as his private jet touched down in New York 3 days earlier than scheduled, none of that mattered. All he wanted was to see his daughter. The business deal in Singapore had collapsed faster than anyone expected. What should have taken 2 weeks wrapped up in 4 days when the other company's CEO got caught in a scandal. Marcus didn't mind. It meant he could surprise 7-year-old Emma, who he'd been missing terribly. His ex-wife Nicole had custody, but Emma stayed at his mansion on weekends and holidays. This weekend was his, and he'd planned to make it special. His driver Joseph picked him up from the private airport at 10 in the evening. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows of the Mercedes as they drove through Manhattan toward his estate in the countryside, about an hour north of the city. Marcus checked his phone, scrolling through emails he'd already read twice. His mind wasn't on work anymore. "How's everything been at the house?" Marcus asked Joseph, who'd been with him for 8 years. "Quiet, sir. Mrs. Chun has everything running smoothly as always," Joseph replied, referring to the head housekeeper. Marcus nodded. Mrs. Chun was efficient, maybe too efficient sometimes. She ran the household staff with military precision: 3 housekeepers, 2 groundskeepers, a chef, and his personal assistant who worked from the home office. Everyone had their role, their schedule, their exact duties. No chaos, no surprises. The mansion sat on 15 acres, surrounded by old oak trees and gardens that looked like something from a European castle. As they pulled through the iron gates, Marcus felt tension leave his shoulders. This was home, or as close as he got to one these days. The divorce 3 years ago had shattered his idea of family, but at least he still had Emma, and this place where they could be together away from everything else. Joseph carried his bags to the front door. Marcus used his key, stepping into the marble foyer lit by the crystal chandelier his mother had helped him pick out years ago, back when Nicole still lived here, back when they'd thought they could make it work. The house was silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. It was late, almost 11 now. Mrs. Chun would have gone home to her own apartment in the guest house. The other staff lived off the property. Everything should have been locked up and quiet. Marcus walked through the first floor, checking the kitchen, the living room, his study. All empty, all perfect, all spotless. He felt the familiar loneliness that crept in during moments like this, when the size of the house seemed to swallow him whole. He headed upstairs, loosening his tie. Emma's room was at the end of the hall, painted lavender with white trim because she'd insisted that was what a princess would choose. Marcus smiled thinking about it. His daughter had opinions about everything: what to wear, what to eat, how stories should end. She got that stubbornness from him, Nicole always said. As he approached Emma's door, he heard something that made him stop. Music, very soft, coming from inside. And voices, or at least one voice, speaking gently. Marcus frowned. It was way past Emma's bedtime. Mrs. Chin knew the rules: lights out by 8:30 on school nights, 9 on weekends. He'd been very clear about maintaining structure and routine. Kids needed that. The parenting books all said so. He pushed the door open quietly. The scene inside made him freeze completely. Emma was in her bed, propped up on pillows, wide awake with her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. But she wasn't alone. Sitting on the edge of the bed, facing away from the door, was a woman Marcus didn't recognize. She was black, probably in her late 20s or early 30s, wearing simple jeans and a cardigan sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She was reading to Emma from a picture book, her voice warm and animated as she did different characters. Emma saw him first. Her whole face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy!" she shrieked, jumping up so fast the book went flying. She launched herself off the bed and ran to him, and Marcus caught her, lifting her up even though she was getting too big for that. She wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed hard. "Baby girl," he said into her hair, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. "I missed you so much. You're early. You weren't supposed to come until Saturday. I finished work early. Wanted to surprise you." The woman had stood up, the book now in her hands. She looked nervous, her eyes darting between Marcus and Emma. Marcus set his daughter down but kept one hand on her shoulder, studying this stranger in his house, in his daughter's bedroom, at 11 o'clock at night. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. The woman straightened her shoulders. "I'm Grace Okafor. I work here. I'm one of the housekeepers." Her accent was slight, American, but with something underneath, probably Nigerian based on the last name. "I know everyone who works in this house," Marcus said. "I've never seen you before. I started 3 weeks ago, sir. Mrs. Chun hired me." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Mrs. Chun hadn't mentioned hiring anyone new. He made a mental note to have a conversation with her about communication. But that wasn't the main issue right now. "It's after 11. Why are you still here? And why are you in my daughter's room?" Grace glanced at Emma, then back at Marcus. Emma couldn't sleep. She asked me to stay and read to her. I was about to leave after we finished the chapter. "I had a bad dream," Emma said quietly, leaning against Marcus's leg. "Grace makes the scary stuff go away." Something in
This is
Marcus's
very
chest
serious,
twisted.
you must understand.
He looked
Oh
down
my
at his daughter,
goodness!
who was
We need
gazing
to
at this
act
woman
now.
with complete trust and affection. Then he looked at Grace again, really looked at her this time. She met his eyes steadily, no guilt or fear in her expression, just calm certainty that she'd done nothing wrong. "What time do you normally leave?" Marcus asked, moderating his tone. "I work the evening shift, sir. For in the afternoon until midnight most days. I help with dinner service, evening cleaning, and whatever else is needed." "Mrs. Chun approved you being in Emma's room?" Grace hesitated for just a second. "Mrs. Chun gives me my task list. Taking care of Emma isn't officially on it, but when she needs something and asks me, I help. She's a sweet kid." Marcus processed this. On one hand, he appreciated that someone on staff was kind to his daughter. On the other hand, this was a breach of protocol. Staff weren't supposed to get personally involved with family members, especially not unsupervised with a child. He had rules about this, good reasons for those rules. You couldn't be too careful these days. "Grace, could you give us a moment, please?" Marcus said. "Go ahead and finish your shift. We'll talk tomorrow." "Yes, sir." Grace set the book on Emma's nightstand, then crouched down to Emma's level. "Sleep good, okay? Don't let the bad dreams win." Emma threw her arms around Grace's neck, hugging her tight. "Thank you for staying. Anytime, sweet girl." Marcus watched the exchange, feeling like an outsider in his own home. When Grace straightened and walked past him, she gave him a small nod, professional and distant. He heard her footsteps going down the hall, down the stairs, and eventually the soft click of the front door closing. He turned to Emma, who was climbing back into bed. "So," he said, sitting where Grace had been sitting, "you like Grace?" "I love Grace," Emma said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "She's nice to me, and she tells the best stories. And she knows all about Nigeria where she's from. And she's teaching me some words in Yoruba. That's her language." Marcus tucked the blanket around his daughter. "What happened to Mrs. Chun reading to you?" Emma made a face. "Mrs. Chun says reading before bed makes kids too excited. She says I should just close my eyes and count sheep. But that's boring, Daddy. And I can't stop thinking about the scary things." "What scary things, baby?" Emma looked down at her elephant. "Sometimes I dream that you and Mommy go away and never come back. That I'm all alone in this big house and nobody comes." Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. He pulled Emma into a hug, holding her tight. "That's never going to happen, Emma. Never. Daddy will always come back. Always. I promise." "But you're gone a lot," Emma said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "And Mommy too. She's always busy with her new job. Sometimes I think maybe I'm not important enough." "You're the most important thing in the whole world," Marcus said fiercely. "More important than any job, any money, anything. You know that, right?" Emma nodded, but Marcus could see the doubt in her eyes. 7 years old, and already worried about being abandoned. He hated that. Hated that his choices, his divorce, his constant travel had planted those fears in her mind. "Tell me more about Grace," he said, trying to sound casual. "How did you two become friends?" Emma brightened immediately. "She started working here a few weeks ago. At first I just saw her cleaning stuff, but then one day I was sad because you had to cancel the weekend because of work, and she saw me crying in the garden. She asked what was wrong, and I told her, and She sat with me and told me this story about a little girl in Nigeria who missed her father who had to work in the city. And in the story, the father always came back and brought presents and they had adventures together. It made me feel better. That was nice of her, Marcus admitted. After that, she always talks to me when she sees me. Not like the other staff who just smile and keep working. Grace asks me questions about school and my friends and what I'm reading. And she helps me with homework sometimes when Mrs. Chun is busy. She's really good at math, Daddy. Like, really good. Marcus stored all this information away. A housekeeper who was good at math and told stories and seemed to have formed a genuine bond with his daughter in just 3 weeks. It was unusual, maybe problematic, or maybe it was exactly what Emma needed. Someone who actually paid attention to her, who treated her like she mattered. He stayed with Emma until she fell asleep, which took another 20 minutes. She kept talking about Grace, about a game they'd played earlier, about how Grace had promised to teach her how to make Nigerian chin-chin, whatever that was. Finally, her eyes grew heavy and closed, and her breathing evened out into sleep. Marcus sat there in the dim glow of the nightlight, watching his daughter's peaceful face. She looked so much like Nicole, same delicate features, same thick dark hair. But she had his determination, his intensity. Even in sleep, she looked like she was concentrating on something important. He thought about the woman he'd found here tonight. Grace Okafor. 3 weeks on his staff, and already she'd become important to Emma. That should worry him. But instead he found himself curious. Who was she? Why was she working as a housekeeper when she was clearly educated enough to help with homework and comfortable enough to defy household protocol to take care of a lonely kid? Marcus carefully stood up and left the room, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. He went to his own bedroom suite and unpacked, his mind churning. Tomorrow he'd call Mrs. Chun first thing and get the full story about this new hire. He'd review Grace's background check and employment file. He'd make sure everything was legitimate and appropriate. But even as he planned all that, a different voice in his head, one that sounded suspiciously like his late mother, asked him why he was so determined to find fault. His daughter was happy. Someone on his staff cared enough to go beyond their job description to comfort a scared little girl. Wasn't that a good thing? Marcus fell asleep, still debating with himself, too tired from travel to reach any conclusions. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Marcus woke at 6, habit from years of pre-dawn business calls with Asian markets. He showered and dressed in casual clothes, jeans, and a polo shirt, something he rarely wore, but that felt right for a surprise day home with Emma. He found Mrs. Chun in the kitchen, already coordinating breakfast with the chef. She was a compact Chinese woman in her 50s, always impeccably dressed in elegant pantsuits, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob. When she saw Marcus, her professional smile faltered just slightly. Mr. Wellington, I didn't expect you until tomorrow. Welcome home. Thanks, Mrs. Chun. Finished early. Wanted to surprise Emma. She'll be delighted. Shall I prepare your usual breakfast? That's fine. He poured himself coffee from the pot on the counter. But I wanted to ask you about something first. In private. Mrs. Chun followed him to his study, her expression neutral, but her posture slightly stiff. She knew something was coming. Marcus sat behind his desk, gesturing for her to take the chair opposite. Tell me about Grace Okafor. Mrs. Chin's shoulders relaxed slightly. You've met her then. I apologize for not informing you about the new hire. It happened while you were traveling, and it slipped my mind to send you an update. Walk me through it. Why did you hire her? We needed additional evening coverage. Sarah, one of our regular housekeepers, left to take care of her sick mother. Grace's resume was excellent. Previous experience with high-profile families, impeccable references, and she was available to start immediately. I conducted a thorough interview and background check through our usual service. Everything cleared perfectly. Where did she work before? Mrs. Chin pulled out her phone, scrolling through notes. 2 years with the Morrison family in Connecticut. Do you know them? James Morrison, the hedge fund manager. Before that, she worked for a family in Boston for 3 years. She also has a bachelor's degree in economics from Boston University. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Economics? And she's working as a housekeeper? I asked about that during the interview. She said she prefers domestic work because the hours are more predictable and The environment is less stressful than the corporate world. Apparently, she tried working in finance for a year after graduation and hated it. Some people do prefer this kind of work, Mr. Wellington. It's honest, and the pay can be quite good with the right family. That made sense, though it still seemed unusual. And her background check was completely clean? Completely. No criminal record, good credit, excellent references who all spoke highly of her character and work ethic. The Morrisons were sorry to lose her when they relocated to London, and she chose to stay in the States. Marcus sipped his coffee. I found her in Emma's room last night. At 11 o'clock. Mrs. Chin's expression tightened. I'll speak to her about boundaries. That's not appropriate. Emma asked her to stay. She'd had a nightmare. Nevertheless, comfort duties should fall to me or to you, not to household staff. I'll make that clear. Marcus thought about Emma's face last night, how happy she'd been to see Grace, how readily she'd hugged her. Emma seems very attached to her already. Miss Emma is a loving child who bonds easily with people who show her kindness. Grace has been very warm with her, which I've allowed because it seemed to make Miss Emma happy during a time when both you and her mother have been particularly busy. But if you'd prefer I maintain stricter separation between staff and family, I can certainly enforce that. It was a gentle rebuke, reminding Marcus that his daughter had been lonely, that he'd been gone more than usual lately, that maybe Emma needed someone to show her kindness. Mrs. Chun never overstepped, but she'd been with the family long enough to speak truth when necessary. No, Marcus said slowly. I don't think that's necessary. But I would like to meet with Grace properly. Have her come to my study this afternoon, say around 2. Of course, sir. Will that be all? Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Chun. After she left, Marcus sat at his desk for a while, thinking. His instinct was to be protective, to control who had access to his daughter. But Emma was clearly happier with Grace around. And if everything checked out, background, references, credentials, then maybe he was being paranoid for no reason. Still, he'd talk to Grace himself, look her in the eye, and get a sense of who she really was. Trust his gut. He'd built a billion-dollar company on his ability to read people. He'd know if something was off. At 2 o'clock exactly, there was a knock on his study door. Come in. Grace entered, looking professional in black slacks, and a simple grace met his eyes steadily. I understand if I crossed a line, Mr. Wellington. It won't happen again if you'd prefer I maintain more distance from Emma. Actually, I wanted to understand better how you two became so close in just 3 weeks. Grace seemed to relax slightly. Emma's a special little girl. The first week I worked here, I noticed her a lot. Watching the staff work, sitting by herself in that big playroom, looking kind of sad. One afternoon she was crying in the garden, and I couldn't just walk past her. I sat down and asked what was wrong. She said you'd had to cancel your weekend together because of work. I remember that trip, Marcus said, guilt flashing through him. Emergency board meeting in Tokyo. Couldn't be avoided. I'm sure it couldn't, Grace said without judgment. I told her about my own father, who worked construction in Lagos and would sometimes be gone for weeks on big projects. How my mother would tell us stories to help the time pass, stories where our father was the hero who always came home. It seemed to help Emma. After that, whenever she saw me, she'd want to talk. I didn't seek it out, but I didn't discourage it either. She needed someone. Marcus felt defensive, but pushed it down. She has people. Mrs. Chin looks after her. Mrs. Chin runs a household. That's different from spending time with a child. No criticism intended. Mrs. Chun is excellent at her job. But Emma needs more than efficiency. She needs connection. It was a bold thing to say to your employer, and Marcus felt his hackles rise. But he forced himself to really consider her words. Was she wrong? Mrs. Chun did run the household beautifully, but she wasn't warm. She was professional, competent, structured. Good qualities in a house manager, maybe not what a lonely 7-year-old needed. Tell me about yourself, Marcus said, changing direction. Mrs. Chun said you have an economics degree from Boston University. That's a good school. Why are you working as a housekeeper? Grace smiled slightly, like she'd expected this question. Because I'm good at it, and it makes me happy. I tried the corporate path, worked at a financial firm in Boston for a year after graduation. Hated every minute. Too much pressure, too many hours, too much pretending to care about things that didn't matter to me. I started housekeeping as a side job to pay bills, and I realized I loved it. There's something satisfying about creating order and beauty in someone's home, about making life easier for people. It's honest work, and at the end of the day, I can see what I've accomplished. Most people with your education would consider it beneath them. Most people care too much about what others think. I don't. My parents worked hard to give me opportunities, and I'm using those opportunities to build a life that makes me happy. If that's cleaning houses, so be it. Marcus found himself liking her answer despite his skepticism. Tell me about your family. My parents immigrated from Nigeria when I was 5. My father's a civil engineer, my mother's a nurse. I have 2 younger brothers. One's in medical school, the other's studying law. Very traditional Nigerian success story. She said it with affection, not mockery. They must wonder about your career choice. They did at first. My mother especially thought I was wasting my education. But they've come around. They see I'm happy, that I'm good at what I do, that I make a decent living. That's what matters to them ultimately, that their kids are okay. What brought you to this area? Mrs. Chun mentioned you worked in Connecticut before. The Morrison family relocated to London, and I didn't want to leave the country. I have roots here, my family, my community. I found this position through an agency I've worked with before. The pay was good, the hours were manageable, and the location was perfect. I didn't know much about you, honestly. I don't follow business news. Marcus almost laughed at that. He was used to people treating him with a mixture of reverence and fear because of his money and influence. Grace seemed completely unbothered by who he was. What do you know about me now? That you work too much, travel too much, and miss your daughter more than you probably admit to yourself. That you're divorced and trying to figure out how to be a good father when you're only home part-time. That you're protective to the point of paranoia sometimes, which I understand even if I don't always agree with it. She paused. And that you love Emma more than anything, which is the most important thing. Marcus sat back in his chair, surprised by her directness. You gathered all that in 3 weeks. Emma talks about you constantly. Kids don't lie about what matters to them. What does she say? Grace's expression softened. That you're the smartest person in the world. That you can fix anything. That when you're home, you make the best pancakes and do all the voices when you read stories. That you promise to take her to see penguins someday, because they're her favorite animal. That she wishes you didn't have to work so much because you're more fun than anyone else. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I am trying to be there for her. It's complicated with the divorce, with work. I'm not judging you, Mr. Wellington. Being a parent is hard. Being a single parent is harder. Being a single parent who runs a major company is harder still. I'm just telling you what I see. A little girl who loves her father and wishes she could see him more. They sat in silence for a moment. Marcus realized he was getting the same kind of honest feedback his mother used to give him before she passed away 2 years ago. The kind that stung, but came from a place of care rather than criticism. Last night, he said, when I found you with Emma, you weren't scared of me. Should I have been? Most staff would have been nervous. You seemed completely comfortable. Grace shrugged. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was helping a child who needed comfort. If that costs me my job, so be it. But I wasn't going to apologize for it. It doesn't cost you your job, Marcus said. But I do need to know, why do you care so much? She's not your child. This isn't your responsibility. Grace leaned forward slightly, her expression intense. When I was Emma's age, my parents were working multiple jobs to get established here. They were gone a lot. I was scared a lot. Scared they wouldn't come home. Scared I didn't belong anywhere. Scared I wasn't enough. My grandmother lived with us and took care of me and my brothers. She wasn't our parent, but she loved us like we were hers. She made us feel safe and seen and important. She saved me in a lot of ways. Grace paused, and Marcus saw real emotion in her eyes now. I see my younger self in Emma. A smart, sensitive kid in a big house with staff who are efficient but not warm, with parents who love her but aren't around enough. I know what that loneliness feels like. So yes, I care more than maybe I should for someone who's just the housekeeper. But I can't help it. When I see a kid who needs someone, I show up. That's who I am. Marcus didn't know what to say. He felt exposed, like Grace had seen through all his careful structures and protections to the truth underneath, that his daughter was lonely, that he hadn't been enough, that his money and success couldn't fix everything. I appreciate your honesty, he finally said. And I appreciate you being kind to Emma. I was worried at first. Protective father instinct. But Mrs. Chin says your background check was spotless. Your references were excellent. You seem like a good person. I try to be. I'd like you to continue spending time with Emma when she needs it. Not as your official job. Mrs. Chin will still assign your regular duties. But if Emma asks for you, if she needs someone, I want you to be there. With my blessing. Grace looked surprised. Are you sure? I don't want to overstep or make things complicated. You're already important to her. Fighting that would just hurt her more. Besides, he smiled ruefully. She needs more people in her life who actually see her, not just manage her. You do that. Thank you, Mr. Wellington. I promise I'll never abuse that trust. Call me Marcus. At least when it's just us talking. Grace smiled, a real warm smile that lit up her whole face. Only if you stop calling this a 20,000 square foot house modest. Marcus laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in days. Deal. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Marcus tried to be home more, rearranging his schedule to take meetings remotely when possible, turning down some travel that wasn't absolutely essential. He wanted to prove to Emma, and maybe to himself, that he could be present in her life. But he also noticed how Grace fit into their world. She worked her evening shifts, and naturally Emma would gravitate to wherever Grace was. If Grace was arranging flowers in the dining room, Emma would appear with her homework and spread it out on the table. If Grace was organizing the library, Emma would sit on the floor and read. They talked constantly about school, about Emma's friends, about Nigerian folktales Grace remembered from her childhood. Marcus found himself joining them sometimes. He'd come down from his office for coffee and find them in the kitchen, Grace teaching Emma how to make chin-chin, crispy fried dough covered in sugar. Or he'd look for Emma and discover her, and Grace in the garden, Grace identifying different plants, and explaining how they grew. What struck Marcus most was how naturally Grace connected with Emma. She never talked down to her, never dismissed her questions or concerns. When Emma worried about a test, Grace helped her study but also reassured her that one bad grade wouldn't define her. When Emma had drama with a friend at school, Grace listened and asked questions and helped Emma think through her own solutions rather than just telling her what to do. Marcus realized he was learning from Grace, learning how to be more patient with Emma, how to listen better, how to be present instead of always thinking about the next meeting or crisis. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus was in his study when he heard laughter from the backyard. He looked out the window and saw Emma and Grace playing soccer on the lawn. Emma was terrible at soccer, completely uncoordinated, but she was laughing hysterically as Grace pretended to struggle to get past her defense. They were both covered in grass stains and happiness. Marcus watched them for a long moment, feeling something complicated in his chest. Gratitude that Emma had someone like Grace in her life. Guilt that he hadn't been providing this kind of joy himself. And something else he didn't want to examine too closely. Awareness of Grace as more than just his employee, more than just Emma's friend. He pushed that last thought away firmly. Grace worked for him. She was helping his daughter. That was all that mattered. Anything else would be inappropriate and complicated. But over dinner that night, Mrs. Chin's night off, so Grace had cooked pasta with vegetables. Marcus found himself watching Grace as she told Emma a story about the talking tortoise from Nigerian folklore. The way her hands moved as she talked, expressive and graceful. The way her eyes sparkled with humor. The way she included him in the story, catching his eye at the funny parts. Emma was engrossed, hanging on every word. When the story ended, she clapped and begged for another. Not tonight, sweet girl, Grace said gently. It's almost your bedtime, and your dad's going to read to you, right? Emma looked at Marcus hopefully. Will you, Daddy? Of course. Marcus stood up. Go brush your teeth and pick out a book. As Emma ran upstairs, Grace started clearing the table. Marcus helped, carrying plates to the kitchen. You're good with her, he said. Really good. She makes it easy. She's a wonderful kid. Thanks in large part to you. This past month, she's been so much happier. I see it. Her teacher mentioned it too, said Emma's been more engaged at school, more confident. Grace smiled. She just needed to feel secure, to know that the people in her life aren't going to disappear. They worked in comfortable silence for a moment, loading the dishwasher together. Then, Grace said something that had clearly been on her mind. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why did your marriage end? Emma's never told me, and it's none of my business, but understanding might help me support her better. Marcus leaned against the counter, surprised by the question, but not offended. Nicole and I wanted different things. She wanted a partner who could be fully present, who could share the daily work of raising Emma. I was building the company, traveling constantly, always distracted. We fought about it for years. Finally, she said she'd rather be alone than married to someone who was never really there. She wasn't wrong. Do you regret it? I regret that Emma's hurt by it. Nicole and I, though, we weren't happy together anymore. Maybe we never were, not really. We got married because it seemed like the next logical step, had Emma because that's what you do. But we didn't have the foundation couples need to survive the hard parts. So no, I don't regret the divorce. I regret that I wasn't better when we were together, that Emma has to live between two houses, that I still struggle to balance work and being the father she deserves. Grace nodded thoughtfully. Emma's lucky, though. Some kids have parents who don't even try. You're trying. That counts for a lot. Daddy, Emma's voice called from upstairs. I'm ready. At midnight, Grace gathered her things to leave. Marcus walked her to the door. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Same time tomorrow, he confirmed. She left, and Marcus stood in the doorway watching her car disappear down the driveway. He felt unsettled in a way that had nothing to do with work or Emma or anything he could logically explain. He was starting to look forward to Grace's shifts, starting to find excuses to be downstairs when she was working, starting to notice small things about her, how she hummed while she worked, how she always had fresh flowers in the entry hall, how she left notes for Mrs. Chun in elegant handwriting. 2 months after Marcus first found Grace in Emma's room, things reached a crisis point. It started with Nicole. Emma's mother called on a Wednesday evening, her voice tight with frustration. Marcus was in his study going through contracts when his phone rang. We need to talk about Emma, Nicole said without preamble. What's wrong? Is she okay? She's fine. More than fine, apparently. That's the problem. Marcus frowned. I don't follow. Emma won't stop talking about Grace. Grace this, Grace that. Grace taught me this. Grace says that. It's constant, Marcus. Who is this woman? And why is she so involved with our daughter? Marcus felt defensive immediately. Grace is one of the housekeepers. She's been very kind to Emma. Housekeepers don't usually become someone's best friend. What's really going on? Nothing's going on. Emma was lonely, Grace noticed, and was nice to her. They bonded. It's been good for Emma. You said yourself her teacher noticed she's happier. I said she's more confident at school. I didn't say I was comfortable with some random staff member becoming a substitute parent. That's not what's happening, Nicole. Grace is just someone who pays attention to Emma. Someone who makes her feel seen. Unlike us, you mean? Nicole's voice had an edge now. Marcus sighed. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Look, I've been thinking about this a lot. Emma needs stability, Marcus. Real stability. Not rotating staff who might leave at any time. I want her to live with me full time. You can have visitation rights, of course, but primary custody should be mine. Marcus felt his stomach drop. We have joint custody. That was the agreement. Agreements can be modified when circumstances change. I have a more stable home situation. I'm not traveling constantly. I'm not bringing strangers into my daughter's life. Grace isn't a stranger. She's been background checked, referenced, and Emma loves her. Emma's 7. She doesn't know what's best for her. We do. Or we should. Nicole paused. My lawyer thinks we have a good case. Think about it, Marcus. Be honest with yourself. Can you really give Emma what she needs? Or are you going to keep delegating her care to staff while you run your empire? The call ended soon after, leaving Marcus staring at his phone with cold dread in his chest. Nicole was serious. She wanted to take Emma away. And the worst part was, some of what she said wasn't wrong. He did travel too much. He did rely on staff. Emma had bonded more with Grace in 2 months than she had with him in some ways. Marcus stood and walked through the house. It was 8:30, Emma's bedtime. He went to her room and found Grace there, as he'd expected, sitting on the bed while Emma showed her drawings she'd made at school. Daddy, Emma smiled. Come see what I drew. Marcus sat on the other side of the bed, looking at crayon pictures of their house, of Emma with her friends, of Grace teaching her to cook. In one picture, Emma had drawn the 3 of them, herself, Marcus, and Grace, standing together in the garden, all holding hands. Something twisted in Marcus's chest. After Emma fell asleep, he asked Grace to stay and talk. They went to his study, and he closed the door. Nicole called. He said without preamble. She wants to modify the custody arrangement. She thinks Emma's too attached to you, that it's inappropriate. Grace's face remained calm, but he saw the flash of concern in her eyes. What do you think? I think Emma's happy for the first time since the divorce. I think you've given her something she desperately needed. But I also think Nicole has a point about stability. What happens when you decide to move on to another job? Emma will be devastated. I'm not planning to leave. People always say that. Plans change. Grace stood, facing him directly. Let me be very clear, Marcus. I'm not just some random employee who wandered into Emma's life by accident. I care about that little girl. Deeply. If I ever needed to leave, I wouldn't do it without preparing her, without making sure she understood it had nothing to do with her. But I have no plans to go anywhere. Why? Marcus asked. Why do you care so much? And don't tell me it's just because she reminds you of yourself. Grace was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus thought she might not answer. Then, she said something he wasn't expecting. Because I care about you too. Both of you. This isn't just a job anymore, Marcus. It hasn't been for a while. The air in the study felt suddenly charged. Marcus stared at Grace, his heart pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying that Emma's not the only reason I show up here every day. I'm saying that I think about you when I'm not here. I'm saying that these past 2 months have been some of the happiest I've had in years. And it's not just because of a 7-year-old girl. Marcus took a step toward her. Grace, you work for me. This is complicated. I know. Potentially inappropriate. I know that too. But it's also true. And I think you feel it too, even if you don't want to admit it. She was right. He did feel it. Had been feeling it for weeks, maybe months. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment watching her with Emma had built into something he couldn't deny anymore. Even if I did, Marcus said carefully, acting on it would be a terrible idea. Nicole's already questioning my judgment. If she found out I was involved with someone on my staff, someone Emma's attached to, she'd use it in court. I could lose custody. Then, we don't act on it, Grace said simply. We keep things professional. I continue working here, continue being Emma's friend. You and I stay respectful and distant. Nobody gets hurt. It sounded reasonable, logical, safe. It also sounded like torture. I should fire you, Marcus said, but without conviction. That would be the clean solution. You find another position, Emma adjusts, Nicole backs off. You could do that, Grace agreed. But Emma would be heartbroken. She's already scared of people leaving her. If I disappeared suddenly, it would confirm all her worst fears. So what's the answer? We just ignore this. Pretend we don't feel what we feel. If that's what's best for Emma, yes. That's exactly what we do. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. You're very calm about this. I've had longer to process it. I realized how I felt about you weeks ago. I've been dealing with it quietly. How? Grace smiled sadly. By reminding myself every day that Emma comes first. That your relationship with your daughter is more important than any feelings I might have. That some things aren't meant to happen, no matter how much we might want them to. Marcus crossed the distance between them before he could think better of it. He didn't touch her, but they stood close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, could smell her subtle perfume. And if Emma wasn't a factor? If you didn't work for me? If the situation was different? Then, I'd tell you that I think you're brilliant and infuriating and lonely in ways you don't show anyone. That you're a better father than you think you are. That watching you with Emma makes me believe in things I thought I'd stopped believing in. That I'd very much like to kiss you right now. Marcus felt his resolve crumbling. Grace. She stepped back, putting safe distance between them again. But Emma is a factor. I do work for you. The situation isn't different. So we don't do this, Marcus. We can't. She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing didn't make it any easier. I should go, Grace said quietly. It's late, and we both need to think clearly. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Grace left, and he stood alone in his study, feeling like he'd just lost something he'd never actually had. The next few weeks were torture. Marcus tried to maintain distance, but it was impossible with Grace working in his house every evening. They were unfailingly polite with each other, but the tension was there, unspoken and electric. Emma noticed something was off. "Are you mad at Grace, Daddy?" she asked one night. "Of course not, baby. Why would you think that? You don't talk to her as much anymore. And you both seem sad." Marcus hugged his daughter. "We're not sad, sweetheart. Just busy. Work stuff." But Emma was perceptive. She started asking if Grace was leaving, if Marcus was going to fire her. Each time, Marcus reassured her that Grace wasn't going anywhere. But the questions revealed Emma's underlying fears, that everyone eventually left, that happiness was always temporary. Meanwhile, Nicole's lawyer sent papers. She was serious about the custody modification. Marcus hired his own lawyer, who told him honestly that Nicole had a decent case. Marcus traveled frequently, relied heavily on staff, and his work schedule was unpredictable. Unless he could demonstrate significant changes, a judge might favor Nicole's more stable situation. "You need to show commitment," his lawyer said. "Cut back on travel. Be more present. Maybe consider having Emma live primarily with you for a period to demonstrate you can handle it." Marcus knew what he had to do. He called a meeting with his executive team and announced he was stepping back from day-to-day operations. He'd remain CEO but would work primarily from home, trusting his team to handle most travel and in-person meetings. It was a risk. The company was used to his constant presence, but his daughter was more important. The team was shocked but supportive. His COO, who'd been with the company since the beginning, clapped him on the shoulder. "About time you remembered what matters, Marcus." With his work situation reorganized, Marcus turned his attention to home. He started taking Emma to school himself every morning, picking her up in the afternoons. He helped with homework, made dinner, did bedtime routines. He was determined to prove to Nicole, and to himself, that he could be the parent Emma needed. But being home more meant seeing Grace more. And seeing her more made everything harder. One evening, Marcus was in the kitchen helping Emma make brownies when Grace came in to start her shift. Emma immediately ran to her. "Grace, we're making brownies. Want to help?" Grace looked at Marcus, uncertain. He nodded slightly, and she joined them at the counter. The three of them worked together, Emma chattering happily while Marcus and Grace navigated around each other carefully, aware of every accidental touch, every shared glance. When the brownies were in the oven, Emma went to wash her hands, leaving Marcus and Grace alone for a moment. "This is hard," Marcus said quietly. "I know," Grace replied. "But look at her. She's happy. That's what matters. Is it enough? For you?" Grace met his eyes. "It has to be." But that night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus found himself unable to settle. He went downstairs and found Grace in the library, returning books to their proper places. She looked up when he entered. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Couldn't stop thinking. About what you said. About what we're giving up. About whether it has to be this way." Grace set down the book she was holding. "Marcus, don't. We agreed. I know what we agreed. But what if there was a way? What if we waited until the custody situation was settled? What if you didn't work here anymore, found another position, and then you'd ask me to leave?" Grace's voice was sharp. "Not ask you to leave. Just transition to a different arrangement. One where we could actually explore this without all the complications." And Emma? How would she feel about me leaving? Even if I promised to stay in her life, even if I explained it wasn't about her, she'd be hurt. You know she would. Marcus did know. He sank into one of the leather chairs. "There's no good answer, is there?" Grace sat across from him. "Not a simple one, no? But, Marcus, you're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to solve for everything at once. The custody battle, your feelings for me, Emma's needs, what Nicole thinks. You can't do that. You need to prioritize. Emma's the priority. She's always the priority. Good. Then, focus on that. Forget about me. Forget about Nicole's criticisms. Forget about everything else. Just focus on being present with Emma, on showing her, and the courts if it comes to that you're committed to being her father first and foremost. And us." Grace smiled sadly. "There is no us, Marcus. Not right now. Maybe not ever. And you need to be okay with that." She stood to leave, but Marcus caught her hand. She looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. "I'm not okay with it," he said. "I'm trying to be, but I'm not." "Try harder," Grace said gently, but she didn't pull her hand away. They stood like that for a long moment, connected but separate. wanting but not having. Then, Grace slowly extracted her hand and left the room. Marcus sat alone in the library until dawn, thinking about choices and consequences, about what he wanted versus what was right, about how the hardest decisions were always the ones with no clear answers. The next morning, he made a decision. He called Grace and Mrs. Chun into his study together. "I want to change Grace's role," he said. "Effective immediately, Grace, you're no longer regular housekeeping staff. I'm hiring you as Emma's nanny." Both women looked surprised. Mrs. Chin spoke first. "Mr. Wellington, I don't think it makes sense," Marcus interrupted. "Emma needs someone focused on her specifically. Grace already fills that role unofficially. Let's make it official with appropriate pay and responsibilities. Grace, you'd work afternoons and evenings, 5 days a week. Your only job would be Emma, helping with homework, activities, meals, bedtime, making sure she's happy and cared for." Grace was shaking her head. "Marcus, this is a bad idea. Your ex-wife already thinks I'm too involved. Making me Emma's official caregiver will only make things worse. Nicole wanted me to demonstrate commitment to Emma's care. This does that. You're not random staff anymore. You're hired specifically for her needs, with proper credentials and responsibilities. It's actually more professional, more appropriate. Or it looks like you're so incapable of caring for your own daughter that you need to hire someone to do it," Grace countered. "I do need help. Every single parent does. Nicole has help too. Her mother lives 10 minutes away and helps with Emma constantly. Why is that acceptable, but my hiring a qualified nanny isn't?" He had a point, and Grace seemed to recognize it. But she still looked uncertain. "What about the other thing?" she asked quietly. "The complication between us? You'll be an employee with a clear job description. We'll maintain professional boundaries. If anything, this makes the situation cleaner, not messier." Mrs. Chun was watching both of them with shrewd eyes. Marcus suspected she'd picked up on the undercurrents between him and Grace, but she said nothing about it. "If you're certain this is what you want, Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Chun said finally, "I'll adjust the household staffing accordingly." They both looked at Grace. She was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing everything. Then, she nodded slowly. "Okay, but on one condition, we tell Emma together that I'm officially her nanny now. And we make it clear that this doesn't change how I feel about her. I'm not just doing this because it's a job." "Agreed," Marcus said. They told Emma that afternoon. She was ecstatic, throwing her arms around both of them. "Grace is staying forever?" "Really? I'm staying as long as you need me," Grace promised. "My whole job now is just to hang out with you." "Best day ever," Emma declared. Marcus told himself it was just gratitude, just appreciation for what she'd done for Emma. But, late at night, alone in his room, he admitted the truth to himself. He was attracted to Grace. Not just physically, though she was beautiful. He was drawn to her confidence, her kindness, her refusal to be impressed by his wealth or intimidated by his power. It was inconvenient, inappropriate, potentially disastrous if he acted on it. So he wouldn't. He'd keep their relationship professional and friendly. Focus on Emma, not risk the stability his daughter had found with Grace in their lives. But the feelings didn't go away. They grew stronger. White blouse, her hair again pulled back neatly. She closed the door behind her and stood with her hands clasped in front of her, waiting. "Please, sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the chair. She sat, her posture straight, but not stiff, her expression open but reserved. Marcus studied her for a moment. In better light, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, probably late 20s. She had the kind of face that was striking rather than conventionally pretty, strong cheekbones, intelligent dark eyes, a mouth that looked like it smiled easily. "I wanted to talk to you about last night," he began.